the very important dudes and dudettes in film history with Matthew Price.
Welcome to another in the astonishingly popular series, Very Important Dudes and Dudettes in Film History. I'm your occasional host, Matthew Price, and today we turn our attention to genius and iconoclast Lars von Trier. Von Trier has a major retrospective coming up at the TIFF Bell Lightbox in Toronto this fall. They'll be showing some of his best-known work, including Breaking the Waves, Dancer in the Dark, and his new film, Melancholia. So who is this guy, and why are we paying such close attention to him? First of all, I love Lars von Trier. In 1991, I was about 20 years old. I was fairly drunk on the possibilities of film, and von Trier had his first major release in North America. It was called Europa. Well, actually, it was called Zentropa here. It was called Europa, but then there was already a movie called Europa, and so they changed the name from Europa to Zentropa because they thought that would be less confusing. That, by the way, is literally the least confusing thing about that movie. Now, if you look for the movie on video, it's back to its original name, Europa. Based on the posters, I think we thought Europa was going to be a dark thriller with a lot of stylish photography and propulsive plot. But it's so much more than that, and turned out to be one of the best examples of postmodern filmmaking and really changed how we thought about movies. The movie is about the narrative actually trapping the characters, and it's completely self-aware. So we went out and scoured our local video stores for other von Trier films. We found The Element of Crime and Epidemic, and neither one is a great film, but they do have that style and that postmodern sense, and they feel a little like a cross between the Coen brothers and Ridley Scott. A couple of years later, when I was going to the Toronto International Film Festival, they showed a mini-series he had done called The Kingdom, which was shown in several parts at TIFF that year. It actually took all of his style and visual technique and applied it to a ghost story set in a hospital, and it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And we thought, oh, we're in for a huge ride. This guy's a great visual fabulist, and he's got tremendous style and all the tools to be like a genre guy that we're gonna love. So then in 1995, von Trier shows up at Cannes with another filmmaker and a set of rules that he's co-authored for making films. He called it Dogma 95 and said it was a manifesto, and he actually encouraged other filmmakers to sign on and make films under it. The basic rules were that you had to use natural light, you couldn't use diegetic sound, and essentially everything had to be accomplished in camera, in real time. It's funny because it runs completely contrary to all the movies that von Trier had made up to this point. And throughout his career, there's been a sense that he goes to the press and says things or does things because he's interested in seeing what kind of reaction he's going to get. Hardly anyone actually wound up adhering to all of the rules when they made their Dogma 95 films. Even von Trier, who made another film in between but then came back and made The Idiots, premiered that at Cannes, he broke several of the rules throughout The Idiots and still called it a Dogma 95 film. It wasn't hugely successful. It probably ruined the career of Harmony Korine, but there were some good things that came out of it. Notably, there are a lot of American independent films that in some ways were influenced by it, particularly mumblecore, which is a very popular filmmaking style that's happening right now. In 1996, we found out that von Trier was going to premiere a brand new movie at the Toronto International Film Festival called Breaking the Waves, and we were suitably excited because the last three films had been so great and The Kingdom had been terrific. So we learned a few things at that premiere. The first thing we learned is that von Trier won't fly anywhere. He didn't show up, and it was opening night, so we kind of expected him to be there. Stellan Skarsgård did come to the premiere. He was one of the lead actors, and I remember him saying before the movie started, you know, I loved von Trier's work, and I wanted to work with him when he got interested in people. Breaking the Waves is von Trier turning to the human being and their existence and focusing so minutely on human behavior and creating something so real and palpable. And yet at the end, he uses it to, again, go outside the bounds of reality and comment on the action just in the way he had in Europa. It's the best of both sides of him. Von Trier has been writing and directing his own films since he was 11 years old. And if you're looking for kind of an overall statement in terms of what he's about, Von Trier uses lies and artifice to get at the truth. That's his primary motive. Even his name, Lars von Trier, is an affectation. He's actually Lars Trier, which is a combination of essentially the two most common names in Denmark. He's John Smith. When he got to film school, because of his, I suppose, megalomaniacal quality, he was nicknamed Von Trier, as in von Sternberg and von Stroheim. The thing is, he kept it. It seems like an insult, but he decided to go with it as part of his persona. In recent years, whether he is stripping away all the film sets to make a movie like Manderley or Dogville, or poking and prodding at one of his idols to produce the great documentary, The Five Obstructions, Von Trier has spent his career poking at the status quo, while at the same time embracing the work of filmmakers from the past that he greatly admires. He kind of lives in the contradictions. Von Trier's new film, Melancholia, opens at the TIFF Bell Lightbox on November 18th before rolling out to wider distribution throughout North America, so you will get a chance to see that in all likelihood. As well, the retrospective of his films, Lars von Trier Waiting for the End of the World, opens November 9th at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, but all of the films we've talked about today are relatively widely available on home video. We do encourage you to check them out. For the Substream, I'm Matthew Price, and this has been another installment of Very Important Dudes and Dudettes in film history.